they would say things like, oh, she speaks with all these different accents. She must come from this ridiculously rich family, like so atas, like who does she think she is, speaking with all these like more westernized accents? Because on the outside, everything was great. Like you're getting the metrics, you're making the money, you're getting the campaigns, people are following you, they know who you are, like everything. That's what people want to get from social media. And here I was thinking, then why am I burning out? Here I thought I was coming to meet somebody who was healed in Bali, and it doesn't seem like you were very healed. And then they suddenly like projecting all of these things onto me.
Welcome to Before We Get There, the podcast where we explore people's life paths, the moments of change, and how we make sense of where we are now. I'm your host, Nicholas Freeman, and today I'm joined by Alyssa Lie. At 18, she skipped university and auditioned her way into musical theater at LaSalle, barely any training. She spent the years since as a singer, content creator, and her own manager. What draws me to Alyssa's story isn't the pivots, it's the question underneath them. She got good at performing a version of herself that people loved, went viral doing it, and then had to figure out what was left when she stopped. We get into the burnout that hit right when everything looked like it was working, and what happened when people started telling her the bright, positive person she'd built was just an... If you've ever wondered whether the self you show people is the real one, this conversation is for you. Enjoy the show. Hi, Alyssa. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. So I think what I wanted to start off with is because I've seen your socials and you do so many different things, from obviously singing and music to content creation and all kinds of things. So I was curious, have you always been a very creative person? And like when you were a kid, did you perform in front of people, or was it something that's developed over time?
That's a really good question, actually. Well, I would say like creativity is just something that comes really naturally to me. Performing and expressing myself and just like loving the arts in general. That I noticed from when I can't give you a specific age. I would say anywhere between 3 to 5. Because I used to watch Barney and Friends and High Five and like all these, kid shows, right? And I would just be able to remember singing, the choreography, the moves and everything. And I think that to me just came really naturally. And when I would listen to a song, I could hear it like maybe 2-3 times and then I'd know the lyrics and I'd know the melody and I'd be able to sing it. So I think I never really thought of it as, oh my God, like I want to be a creative person or I want to be a performer. I think it was just a natural part of who I was. And I didn't probably have the words for it at that age. But throughout my entire life, I never really got a chance to pursue that professionally, whether it was in terms of getting teachers, getting coaches. I think it was really like, singing in your room, singing in the bathroom, just doing everything pretty silently on my own. And it was only when I was 18 when I decided to go to LaSalle to pursue it professionally and actually get trained. I think that was when I properly developed it. But before that, it was just me.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so was it a difficult decision to go, like were you debating whether or not you should go for a more traditional kind of degree in education or performing arts, or was it like, that was my chance, I'm going to run and do it?
I think it was a decision that I felt had to be made because it was at a point in my life where it could go either way, right? I could go to university and do the typical route, or I could try for the first time in my life to actually pursue something that I cared about. And I remember we sat down at a dinner table and my aunt and uncle were there. So they're actors and they've been in the industry for a long time. So we sat at the dinner table. They were like asking me to sing songs and stuff to kind of show them, okay, why do you want to pursue this professionally? So I did. And I think throughout that process, it was really clear that both of them had different views. So one of them had the view of, Alyssa, you should have a plan B. So you should still go to university. You can pursue your arts on the side. And after you get your university degree, you can decide what you want to do with it. But then I think my uncle at the point was just like, I've been in that position before, taking a degree that wasn't aligned with me. and I would not want to see you go down that path. I think you should just go with plan A. And so my parents were there as well. And so it was just like, this conflicting view. So it just became, okay, Alyssa, I think you should just decide what you want to do. And I think for me, it was just plan A. I don't think I've ever lived thinking about plan B, because I've always had this notion of life is short, right? And you should always be happy living your life as much as possible. And if plan A was going to lead me to that place of joy and feed my soul and feed my passion and give me a reason to keep living, right? I think I would just go with plan A. So it wasn't really, really a question in my mind. Like, there was a bit of fear, obviously, because I had not done it professionally before. I had not been trained professionally before. But I think in terms of like the deeper, like soul purpose, it was clear.
That's awesome. But that's interesting. You have family members that were in the arts, but you didn't do any enrichment or stuff when you were a kid growing up to do singing or music or anything?
Nope. I mean, I've always wanted to. I think it was probably just the environment that I was in. And also just like, being a kid, and sometimes you hear no a few times and you just take that really personally and you're like, okay, no, then I won't do it anymore. Right. So you kind of keep that dream just in the back of your mind of like, one day maybe I'll make it real. Yeah. So I think that was really, that was it.
And so when you went to LaSalle, you went for musical theater?
Yeah.
And so was that the dream to go like be on Broadway, or what was the plan?
Again, another good question. So it was funny because honestly, I chose musical theater because I couldn't get into music. Because to get into the music program, you needed to have a theory background, which again, like I mentioned, I had no background. So I couldn't get into music purely because I didn't have any theory. And musical theater was the one thing which firstly didn't really require me to have the theory aspect. And secondly, it was very practical. So there were 3 components: singing, acting, and dance. And what I needed to do basically was, I think, sing 2 songs, do a monologue, and then go for a dance call with a choreographer. And I had also never done those things before. But because in my dream, I was like, oh my God, I love Hannah Montana so much. Like, I want to be able to sing, act, and dance, And like, that has always been something, again, like I mentioned, like watching Bali and all, like, it just came really naturally to me. So I was like, okay, I think this is the course that I have the most potential for, but I have to rely on like my raw talent, right? So about a month leading up to the audition, I took, I think, 2 or 3 singing lessons just to prepare those songs, right? Those 2 songs. And then I went for 1 or 2 monologue sessions with an acting coach to kind of prep my monologue. And dance was nothing. And then I just showed up. And I was like, I have no expectations. I don't know if I'm going to get in. Like, I have no clue at all, but I'm just going to do it because my aunt was pushing me. She was like, I think you should do it because, you've been talking about this a lot. And this is the first time you get to really make a decision about the direction of your life. I think you should just do it and see how it goes. So I did it. And amazingly, I got in. And 2 years into school, I realized that one of my acting teachers, he told me, we went on this acting retreat. And he kind of pulled me aside and he was like, hey, Alyssa, I want to tell you something about you. And he said, you have this ability to see the world through the eyes of a child. And this is something that a lot of adults and people who grow up, they lose it along the way. They don't have this childlike sense of wonder, like sparkle and joy. And he said, I hope you never lose this. And because I saw this like raw spark in you, I actually pushed you to get into the course because there were 5 people on the panel, the audition panel. And I think about 3 or the majority of them were like, oh, I think she's too young, she's too inexperienced, doesn't feel like she has enough exposure in the industry yet. I don't think she'd be right for the course. But he was like the one who basically pushed me to get in. So I always go back to this whole story to say that one person who believes in you and who sees that spark in you can truly change your life.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had Shanice Stanislaus on podcast a few episodes.
Yeah, I love Shanice. She's great.
Yeah, she had a very similar story, right? Where she was feeling very unhappy in her life and like people weren't believing in her. And there was one person again who was like, no, you have something special. You need to go and do this. Believe in yourself.
Yeah, I think it was her clowning mentor.
Yes, yeah. So that's super important for people. And
100%.
I guess it would be unfortunate if somebody doesn't isn't able to experience that or doesn't find the person at the right time to be with them.
Yeah.
So then when you start, going through the course, it feel very natural, like, oh, this is supposed to be.
I would say, of course, the acting and the singing and the dance and stuff, the physical and practical aspects of things were natural to me because they were within my control. The things that were outside of my control were like the people that I went to class with, certain personalities that just didn't really gel with me. There was, in the first year, a girl who I think very intentionally just made me feel like I wasn't good enough and like, why are you even in the course, And she would always comment on anything that I did because everything that we did, we had to perform in front of each other. So any single class that we had, it would always be, do your monologue in front of your classmates, do your songs in front of your classmates. And then we give each other feedback. It was very open in that sense. And I think because it was also very open, then people felt like they could just say whatever they wanted, and just give their opinions wherever they felt was valid. And me, obviously not having the experience prior, came into school with a huge imposter syndrome of like, yeah, maybe I don't deserve to be here. And then now this girl's telling me I don't deserve to be here. It made me really, 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 just really questioning what I was doing and questioning whether or not I wanted to continue the course. So I remember at the end of the first year of school, I called my ex-counselor at that point. I called my ex-counselor and I asked her and I said, hey, what do you think I should do? This thing's happening in school. Should I continue? Should I drop out? And we had a long conversation. So the idea at the end of the day was she told me to think about this. She said, think about what you would have to gain and what you would have to lose in both scenarios. If you left, what would you have to gain? What would you lose? And if you stayed, what would you gain and what would you lose? And which one is a worse decision? And I thought about it and I was like, okay, if I stayed, I have to put up with, difficult people. But I would have so much more to lose because for 18 years of my life, already up to that point, I had not done this. And would I allow one person or a few people to dictate the rest of my life or 1 year of my life or just like 2 more years of school as compared to 18 years of me not having done it? So it was like, okay, I can get through this. I can do the next 2 years. I will focus more on myself, less on being liked by other people, less on their opinions, and I will focus on the work. And that will mentally get me through the rest of the degree program. And it did. And I think that it turned out great, right? Now looking back, it's like, yeah, like that wasn't that difficult. Like it was great. But I think going through it in the moment, really feeling these criticisms and being a beginner, I think that was tough in the moment. But of course, it made me stronger. And of course, now it doesn't really faze me anymore,
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because I think a lot of people who are public about their lives or they're putting stuff online sometimes get some bad comments and that sort of thing. So has that going through that experience help you down the road about being more confident to, your content out and be open in public and vulnerable in public?
Yeah, 100%. I think the biggest thing that I learned, and I will say I give so much credit to my acting teachers because they truly changed not just my training, but they changed my perspective and my view of life. And when that was happening, I felt like I was being bullied, right? So I went to one of my acting teachers and I said, this is what's been going on. I feel really terrible. What should I do? And my acting teacher is always the kind of guy who's like, well, what should you do? And I'm like, come on, you're my teacher. Give me some advice. Stop asking me what should I do. Tell me what to do. And he didn't, right? He said, Alyssa, I think you already know what needs to be done. And then he said, sometimes people will do these things because maybe they're hurt, maybe they're jealous, maybe they're insecure. And all you need to do is love them. And I was like, what the hell? That's the first response. What the hell? What are you telling me to love this person who's being so mean to me? But then, I went through again the next 2 years being like, okay, my teacher said, love her, love her, love her, love her. What does that mean? And so I did a lot of that inner work as well. What does it mean to love somebody who is hurting you? Are they also hurting themselves? Is there something that they're going through that I could potentially empathize with? And I think people always say like the emotion that's stronger than hate is indifference. Like when you reach a point of indifference, you just don't care at all. Like if you hate something, there's still a level of emotional investment, right? And what I noticed was it went from this anger and like rage and like almost hate and resentment to, I think in the last year of school, it was truly just indifference. Like she would say something and I'll feel like laughing. Whereas previously I would feel like crying, and I did. Yeah. And then after a while, like I just started noticing like, oh goodness, like the things that she was doing was actually more laughable than hurtful, because I could finally see objectively where that was coming from. And it wasn't really an attack on me. I mean, that's how it was projected. It was projected as I'm attacking Alyssa, right? But I think behind that, it was more of like she felt that this was the way she could express herself to be seen and to be heard and to be somebody of significance. So when I could see that, it just became really funny. Yeah, and then I would laugh a lot. So then I think it was cool.
So that it didn't just kind of die out, or was there some big showdown, or?
There was no showdown. There was one time when we had like this truth circle, and she very blatantly told me that she didn't think that was very good. She thought that whatever roles that I was getting, she should have been getting instead. And then was kind of like trying to rally people to agree with her. But instead, my classmates were agreeing with me, and they were like, hey, you can't say this to her, like, how can you tell us such things? So I think in that moment, I also realized like, wow, actually, I do have people who support me. I do have people who see my side of the story, and I'm not in it alone. So I think that really also just gave me more confidence to just be like, I think I can continue as I am. Yeah.
And then, so once you graduated, how was the transition to being out in the world where you need to earn a living and gigs and putting out, music and all this sort of thing?
I would say that school teaches you a lot of practical things, but they don't teach you enough about the business world. At the end of the day, showbiz is showbiz. It's still business. And I think they focus a lot on the show and not enough on the business. And what I had to learn, obviously coming out of school, was, oh gosh, I'm suddenly almost like an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I have to market myself. I have to sell myself. I still have to somehow hone my skills. But then now I need to turn it into something that will actually make money, something that's more structured. And over time, I realized a lot of this really came down to branding and packaging and marketing and networking and just all of these skills that entrepreneurs naturally will develop. But I think creative people are not really taught to do that. I think creative people are usually taught, if you're good at singing, if you're great at it, if you're a good composer, if you're a great actor, the work will come. Stay in this abundance mindset and everything good will come to you. Just hone your craft. But more so, especially now because of the rise of digital media and everything, and also less like live performances, live shows, right? A lot of the power is now going back to the creator as opposed to being in the hands of like a director or a producer or a record label, which also means that now artists who've just graduated cannot rely on all these gatekeepers to open the gates for them. They have to learn how to open the gate for themselves because the medium of art has changed. And that was the gap that I very obviously noticed coming out of school. Because I still had that mindset of like, if I just keep acting, if I just keep singing, like all these things will happen. But then, you go through it. And then after a while, it's like, yeah, it's happening. Like I'm still getting the gigs. I'm still getting the work. But why do I feel like there's a ceiling? Why do I feel like I can't break through this ceiling? And that comes down to learning how to manage yourself, learning how to package yourself, learning how to present yourself, and learning what is the deeper value that you provide on top of just your skills. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, because maybe the power is less in the hands of a few gatekeepers, but now some of that power is also in the algorithm or in the social media platforms.
100%.
You get exposure
100%.
from. And that's one of the things I was interested to talk to you about is this balance between art and doing what's going to work for the algorithm or what music, what people are looking for in music and songs, what they're going to find on Spotify easily, that sort of thing. So when you, after you learned how to do this, you know, started getting into marketing yourself, positioning yourself, creating, you know, your branding, people could see. How do you think about that balance between your creativity and your art, and then, but it needs to be marketable to brands?
I think my perspective on that has definitely changed a lot because I started TikTok properly in 2020 when I was purely doing it for fun because I was just bored at home and I was like, there's nothing else to do. There are no shows, there's nothing. Like, let's take all of this talent, put it online. And it worked, right? Like, it got me the virality, it got me the views and everything. I was doing different accents, I was doing comedy, I was doing skits, voiceovers, like all of this stuff. And after a while, I started realizing that I was also just creating for the algorithm. Initially, it started from a place of joy. And then after a while, once you see the numbers come in and you see the views, you're like, wow, I think I found this formula. I have to keep doing this over and over and over again to kind of keep the algorithm working for me. Eventually, that led to me burning out. And when I burnt out, I had to really rethink how I want to show up on social media and why I burnt out in the first place. Because on the outside, everything was great. Like, you're getting the metrics, you're making the money, you're getting the campaigns, people are following you, they know who you are, you know? Like, everything, that's what people want to get from social media. Right. And here I was thinking, then why am I burning out? And I spent a lot of that time really thinking about what was it about social media that drew me to it in the first place and why that shifted eventually. And I think because initially I was operating from a place of joy and no real expectations. I wasn't thinking about like turning this into a career or whatnot. I was just doing it because I thought it was an outlet to express myself. And people related to that. But then as the algorithm gives you this dopamine hit and like this feedback loop, right? You start forgetting what actually brings you joy. And you start thinking, what brings the algorithm joy? Like, what brings the audience joy? And then you end up putting yourself back in that place of not having the power and giving the power back to the authority, which in this sense is the algorithm. So I had to really learn to take myself out of that space and stop thinking about the views, stop thinking about the metrics, stop thinking about what people were going to say or not say, and just find what I wanted to say. So I started posting a lot more about mental health and my story and my journey and like the behind the scenes stuff that I was going through, not just the entertainment content. And now I'm also talking about branding, obviously, because that's another area of my life that I've been doing already for the past 10 years of managing myself, but I've never explicitly expressed it. So even until now, I think even until this year, last year, people were coming to me and they were like, who's your manager? Like, you know, like what a great manager you have. And I'm like, it's me, you know, like, do you not see that? But I think people still have this impression of like, if you're an artist, if you are creative, somebody must be managing your business side of things, because it's not common for a creative person to have an equally strong business mindset. And it's also not really common for, I would say, like an artist or someone who is more public facing to not have somebody handling their back end. Yeah.
Okay, I have a couple of questions about that. First, I want to ask, when you realized, was it a sudden realization that you were burnt out or you were through this, or was it gradually that you realized it over time?
I would say it was definitely a gradual process because it started with just like anxiety. It was kind of like every time I would post a piece of content, I would keep watching it and just like constantly watch my stuff. And I would like want it to hit a certain number of views.
Refreshing.
Exactly. And then if it did hit those views, I'd be like, yes, you know, I made a great piece of content. But if it didn't, I'd be so disappointed. Be like, oh no, like, you know, is the algorithm like hating me now? Like, is it not working anymore? And then you would get another high of like something else going viral and then not. And then, you know, and then to me, it just became that, like, I was just in this mindset of constantly trying to please and constantly trying to succeed. And anytime I didn't succeed with those metrics that I had given myself, then I would feel like a failure. So it's just this constant like roller coaster of emotions while making the content. And after that, I started noticing that I felt angry, like making the content. I felt angry, but I would still record it anyway, you know, because it was easy to just like turn on your phone, just like record something and then post it. right? But then I was like, why is this coming from such a place of like annoyance and like resentment? Like, where's that joy that I used to have where I could just flip up a phone and post it and like just smile and like laugh at my content? Now it's like I open my phone, I post it, and I'm like, oh God, like this could be better, that could be better. Like it's not even working, It's just like too many thoughts. And that was around the point where I was like, I need to say something deeper. I think people are only seeing the tip of the iceberg because when you position yourself as a creative or an entertainer, people expect entertainment. But as you know, like being a human being, you can't just be entertaining all the time. Like you have your own life too, and you have your own story. So you have things going on behind the scenes that I wasn't particularly posting about because I was like, this is my entertainment content realm, right? And then I think I was receiving some comments as well when you talk about haters. So I was receiving some comments where people were basically saying, oh, she's putting on a hosting voice. Like this is not how she naturally speaks. She's putting this on for the camera. Or they would say things like, oh, she speaks with all these different accents. She must come from this ridiculously rich family, like so atas, like who does she think she is speaking with all these like more westernized accents? Right. I was like, yeah, it's just content, like not that deep. And then I think the other part that really, really was more hurtful for me was when people said, oh, I think her positive energy is just put on, like it's there for show. Like, I don't think anybody can be such a positive person or have this much energy and come from like a real or genuine place. That was when I was like genuinely questioning myself. It's like, okay, like you comment on my accents, you comment on my skills. That's fine because those are skill-based, right? But when you comment on my personality of saying, oh, I don't think you're naturally a positive person, this positive energy or whatever is like toxic, you're faking it, I was like, oh, whoa, am I a toxic positive person? Like, am I really promoting toxic positivity? Like, is this a persona? Am I being pretentious? And I genuinely questioned that. And I went to Bali to heal. So cliche, but anyway, I went to Bali to heal. And I thought, in that period of time, I could meet some interesting people, which I did. But then I also met this one girl who was Singaporean, but she was living in Bali. And she was posting about it a lot on social media, saying, oh, this is my Bali life, this is how much I spend, et cetera, where I stay. So I was like, wow, I would love to also find somebody and speak to somebody who is living a life that's different from Singapore and why. Like, why did she feel like she wanted to go to Bali to like find herself? So I thought, yeah, this would be a great person to connect with. And I connected with her. I remember on that day, I love pink. Pink's my favorite color. And I'm not going to deny it. Like, yeah, pink's my favorite color. So I wore pink from head to toe, okay? I wore a pink top, a pink skirt. I had a pink backpack. And I had pink butterfly clips. I showed up. I was like, this is Bali. Like, who's going to judge me, right? So I show up for the lunch. And we sit down. And I could tell, like, from the first 5 minutes, she was judging me so hard. Like, looking at me, like, looking at my outfit. And she probably just thought, oh, God, another influencer. And I noticed that during the conversation, the first things that she would always ask me is like, oh, is there something like deeper? Are you hiding something? Is there something that maybe you are working on that you feel like you've not been real about, et cetera, et cetera? And she said, if I were you and I've been there before, because she was older. So she's like, oh, if I were you and I've been there before, when you're young, you want to like put on this persona or like put on this image and be this kind of a person. She was like, I used to do that too. I dyed my hair blonde. I went through this like edgy phase. And then she said, if I were you or if I were managing you, I would cut your hair. I would make you wear denim, maybe something more edgy, maybe blue. And I was like, what is going on? Like, seriously, like what's going on? And then after that, she also said something along the lines of like, oh, influencers in Singapore are one of the most superficial people that I've ever met. And then I was like, here I thought I was coming to meet somebody who was healed in Bali, and it doesn't seem like you were very healed. And then they suddenly like projecting all of these things onto me. And I think for me, that was just shocking because I was already going through this phase of like questioning myself and thinking, am I pretentious? Am I not being real? And then here, this person was like, I think there's something deeper. I think you're hiding something. I'll make you wear blue. I'll make you wear denim. And I was like, oh no, what's going on? I left that conversation. I cried so hard. I called 5 of my closest friends to ask them about this. And they were all saying, you know, Alyssa, I think you have to ask yourself what feels real to you, not what feels real to somebody else, not what appears real to somebody else. Because at the end of the day, it's all appearances. You can wear blue and denim and still be insecure. It doesn't make a difference, you know? And you can wear all pink and be a really mature person. Like, you know, the colors don't define you. The things that you wear don't define who you are. And I think that was also the turning point for me to be like, I think I'm burning out because I'm caring too much about everybody else's expectations of me. And I was caring too much about what they thought about me. And I was caring too much about how they perceive me just because of what I wear or how I spoke or the things that I liked. And I was like, I need to stop caring about all of this. And I think when I stopped caring about that and when I started sharing about, you know, the mental health, the branding, the stuff that I was working on as a creative entrepreneur, the me managing myself behind the scenes, I started to slowly feel like I was getting myself back. Like I started to slowly feel like myself again. And it was bringing me more joy, but it was very vastly different from the joy that I think content brought me at the start, which was comedy and skits and accents. And that was also another really difficult part to navigate because now I had to let go of that old identity that worked so well and kind of rebrand myself or like just shift my content in such a way that felt more real to me, but probably felt more shocking to the people watching.
So, I mean, that's very interesting because I think everybody is putting on some sort of,
Right.
for most of the time. Maybe there's a few people in your life that you're very unguarded with and you're completely at your base level self that's, you know, you're not thinking about what are they going to think of me, but when you're at work, when you're talking to somebody new, most of the time you're aware a little bit of what, and I think it's a very human thing, right? You talk to everybody the same way if just meeting them as if you knew them for your first, you know, very long time and you're already comfortable with them. But I think when you put stuff online, it's very magnified.
Of course.
And strangers and people are only, it's a one-way reaction, right? They're looking at you and judging you or deciding what to think about you. You don't know who they are.
Yeah.
How do you think the challenges of that have, like, when you pivoted your content, because there's this part about authenticity. I think generally it's a good thing. Again, same thing with social media. Everybody curates your social media to some extent.
Yeah.
Even if you talk about Gen Z putting up blurry photos, it's a choice to put up a blurry photo rather than a very millennial, beautiful, Insta beautiful photo, right? It's still some sort of choice about what you're putting online, whether or not it looks perfect or whether it looks natural. So do you think that you would have reached that point of wanting to be talking about these sort of topics, mental health and vulnerability, if you hadn't gone that first part of being judged before?
I think that was the catalyst. I think that was the part of me that finally realized, wow, social media can be so divisive. And I don't want to be part of that division. I want to be part of a social media that's more inclusive or more accepting or just more wholesome and holistic. So I think that was the catalyst for me to be like, okay, I think it is time for me to start sharing more of the deeper stuff so that people would not assume that Alyssa is this one-dimensional character, which I felt like I wasn't. And I think because social media is obviously part of my work, right? And such a huge part of my life, I don't feel like I could just continue playing a certain character for the rest of my life. If I wanted to continue creating content, I needed to create content that was deeper and that also felt meaningful to me.
And so have you gotten over worrying if something isn't getting enough views or enough engagement?
I don't think I worry about that a lot anymore. I think for me, I just set myself income goals, right? I'm just like, okay, these are my income goals. These are my career goals. These are like the milestones that I want to achieve in my life. And as long as I'm hitting those things, I don't think so much about the views anymore, because there are also many, many stories of people with like millions of followers who can't sell a thing, you know, or they put out like, I don't know, they sell a t-shirt or something and then nobody buys it. So then it makes me feel like, well, followers, if they're not following you for a deeper purpose or a deeper reason, how are you going to monetize off of that? And I'm not saying you can't create content just for the fun of it, but if content is your career, you got to monetize it somehow. I think if you're purely doing content for fun, then that's fine. That's your creative outlet. But I think if it's part of your career or part of your brand building or part of your job, then you have to start thinking, how can I also then incorporate certain other elements into it to make the content work for me?
So then do you still have projects that you're doing just for artistry? Is it?
Yeah, 100%. So all my music projects are all for the art. Yeah, I think that is my outlet for expression. And I used to put so much pressure on music because I would be like, okay, music has to be the art. It also has to fund me. It also has to like be the network. It has to be the opportunity. It has to be the business, etc., etc. Like putting all of this pressure on just music, which I love. And I think it was kind of similar to like content when you think about it in that way. Like initially you start purely out of joy and then it turns into a career and then it shifts the way that you look at it. And I felt that I didn't want to put so much pressure on music to be this thing that funded everything and was basically the be all and end all of my life, because that will also limit the amount of artistry that I can do, you know, because I will always have to think about the commercial outcome. And like, is this bringing me money? Is this bringing me new performances? Is this bringing me new jobs, etc.? Why don't I focus my business mind on the things that can make me more money, like content or advisory, and then leave my art for my art and let the art feed my soul? I think when I made that distinction in my head, I still do performances. I'm not going to lie. I still do performances, but I'm very selective with the performances that I do. And I focus a lot more on just making my own things. You know, like whether it's organizing my own concerts, having my own music video, doing my photo shoots, you know, that is where I feel all of my creative energy goes into. And then everything else like works is the back end system of making this work. And if I were an artist manager, that's what an artist manager would do too, right? You look at a lot of people or certain artists in Singapore and you realize that, yeah, they're musicians. Most of their money comes from brand sponsorships or hosting or photo shoots, you know, like, so all I'm doing is doing what an artist manager would do anyway, but because I'm doing it myself. So I think I had to consciously tell myself, keep this for the art, keep this for the money.
And
Yeah.
so did you get advice or did you see that in other people and then decide to do it yourself? Or how did you discover that and then decide when to put it into practice?
Yeah. Very interesting question. I think a lot of these things are quite instinctual to me. Like the minute I thought about, okay, Alyssa, I don't want to just be someone who is just hired by a director. I don't want to be part of the cattle call of people going for modeling castings, which I used to do as well. I didn't want to be part of all these things. I didn't want to be somebody who was like a pick me girl. And like, I wanted to pick myself. And the minute I decided that for myself, my first thought was branding. Like literally just that was my first thought. Because I looked at the way Ariana shifted from being like a Nickelodeon star to then how she was positioned as an artist, right? Similarly to people like Miley or like Olivia Rodrigo or even Sabrina Carpenter, like you always see these rebrands and you have to kind of like figure out how they did this rebrand. You know, how did they get from here to here? What shifted for them? I might not have a team behind me, but I understand how the team works, right? So now it's about how do I teach myself to be that team? And then of course, like, you know, when I'm hiring like VAs or assistants or whatever, then I start to learn how to delegate and things. But the bigger picture, which is the bigger strategy, that still has to come from you. Unless I want to give my power away again to an agency or to a manager, I will have to learn how to be that team. So I think it was just like, okay, Alyssa, like you know all of these things. You just have to learn how to wear different hats in different moments and then learn how to like take off that hat when it's necessary as well. Yeah.
That's super interesting. So now that sounds like you have a very good system down that's working for you.
It's good. It's still very fine.
What are some future goals that you have Specifically, I usually ask because I like to hear what people's definition of success is, because it's different for everybody. And I usually ask, if I were to talk to you again in 5 years, what would you like to be able to tell me has happened, for instance, now? That would make you feel like that time was a success.
Okay, so I've been more and more passionate about thought leadership and more passionate about thinking, how can I use all the experiences and things that I've learned and give value to other people? So whether that's in terms of building my community, which is what I'm doing right now, whether that's writing a book, which I really want to do within the next 5 years, just turning all of this into pieces of like knowledge and pieces of my experience that somebody else can benefit from and get value from, that would be a success to me. Obviously, like being on bigger stages, speaking about the things that I'm writing about the things that I've learned, about the things that I've lived through. I think having my life be that work of art, not just my music be my art or like my content be my art, but just having my life and my experience and my stories and my whatever expertise be that art and be that creation, that to me would be a success. Yeah, it's a big dream.
Well, I think you can do it. Well, thank you so much for joining me. If people aren't following you or haven't heard your music, where can they find you? On Spotify, Instagram, TikTok?
Yeah, of course. They can find me on social media, like all social media platforms really, except X, which I don't use. So Instagram, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Well, my name is my name. It's Alyssa Lie. So that's pretty straightforward. And if it's music, it's also Alyssa Lie on Spotify, on Apple Music, and all of these other streaming platforms. So everything is literally my name. So I think it's pretty easy to find me.
Okay, awesome. We'll put some links in the show notes for everybody. But thank you again for it. was great to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to Before We Get There with your host, Nicholas Brayman. Please like and subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Before We Get There Podcast. New episodes are released every other Thursday morning. See you next time.